Test. Palais Wilson, ground floor pour le webcast. Canal anglais, canal 2.
I call to order meeting number 45. I call to order meeting number 45 of the 78th session of the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. It is my great pleasure to once again welcome His Excellency, the Head of Delegation, His Excellency Mr. Zimyabi. I would also, of course, like to once again welcome the delegation and all those observing the dialogue. Your Excellency, as I mentioned to you, that you had heard questions under cluster 1, 2, and 3 from the task force representatives who are responsible for these 3 clusters. We had agreed, Excellency, yesterday that we will take the first 30 minutes of this morning first to allow you and your distinguished delegation to respond to the balanced questions left unanswered from cluster 1, 2, and 3. On 2, you had primarily responded to them all, but if you feel there are still anything that you wish to add, of course, this is the opportunity. So first 30 minutes, if you could kindly respond to the unanswered questions on 1, 2, and 3. And after that, we will then take follow-up questions under cluster 3. So with that, I will request you to kindly take the floor. But before that, I would like to remind dear colleagues and distinguished delegation that to facilitate the process and to enable us to cover the full range of issues at hand, to kindly speak in a concise manner, giving due attention to the time allocations. And with this, I have the pleasure, Your Excellency, to give you the floor. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. What I've decided to do is I'll allow my delegation, those that are responsible for specific sectors, to answer specific questions related to that. Then I'll sum up after that. So I will request my delegation, let's just be straight to the point and answer the question so that we save time. Can we start? We're starting?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mr. Godzi from the Ministry of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. The country rapporteur asked the Zimbabwe delegation why it should not consider it more appropriate in line with the party principles to entrust matters concerning the formation, funding, and accountability of the Commission to the competence of Parliament, thereby removing it as much as possible from the executive branch. Chairperson of this esteemed committee, allow me to clarify on this issue pertaining to the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission. The Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission is not part of the executive arm of the state. It is one of the Chapter 12 commissions established to support democracy. The commission is independent and is not subject to the control or direction of anyone, and thus enjoys operational, decisional, and financial autonomy. It has its own vote from Treasury. Madam Chairperson, the Commission is fully compliant with the Paris principles, and precisely this is why it achieved the Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions A status in 2016, which it has sustained to date. Zimbabwe will continue to safeguard the independence of the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, being mindful of the fact that not all human rights matters are of such a magnitude to attract the attention of UN human rights scrutiny, but suitable constituted national human rights institutions can perform these functions. You also asked him about the budget for the last 5 years. We are going to furnish you with the budget for the Commission for the last 5 years. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair of the Committee and Head of Delegation. The esteemed committee, my name is Kingston Magaya from the Ministry of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. Madam Chair and esteemed Head of Delegation from Zimbabwe, you made an inquiry pertaining to sexual and reproductive health, and you touched on issues of abortion, where the esteemed committee highlighted that the high incidences of abortion in Zimbabwe, but the position from Zimbabwe is that there are no high incidences of abortion in Zimbabwe. But notwithstanding that, the Ministry of Health and Child Care too has obligations to ensure that there are various programs to increase access to post-abortion care and reduce maternal deaths from unsafe abortions. The ministry provides essential services for medical equipment, stocks of medicines, and costs associated with transportation and treatment. The ministry ensures awareness and has established information on centers from which citizens receive reproductive health services, including family planning services. It promotes reproductive health rights through multi-sectoral programs that aim to expand access to sexual and reproductive health rights services, especially for adolescents. They address teenage pregnancy and integrate gender sensitivity and comprehensive sexuality education into national programs. The government of Zimbabwe, through the ministry, also collaborates with UNFPA and Africa Aid to implement initiatives such as youth-led outreach, virtual case management, and training in humanitarian settings on the minimum initial service package. They also implement outreach programs to address negative social norms hindering access to care. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Farai Chingwere from the Ministry of Finance, Economic Development and Investment Promotion. The committee noted that there is high inflation in Zimbabwe, in terms of which about 1 in every 3 people in Zimbabwe are languishing in poverty, whilst 1 in every 2 have got poverty. And that's point out to inflation. And I wish to highlight that that is not the correct position in Zimbabwe. Our official statistics as of August 2025 indicate that our ZIG month-on-month inflation was at 0.4% in August 2025, shedding 1.2% percentage points to the July 2025 rate of 1.6%. The ZIG year-on-year inflation rate for the month of August 2025 is measured by the all items ZIG consumer price index was 93.8%. And on the US dollar side, which is the other official currency which we use in Zimbabwe, month-on-month inflation in August was 0%, shedding 0.3 percentage points on the July rate of 0.3%. The USD year-on-year inflation rate for the month of August, as measured by the all-time items USD consumer price index, was 14.2%. Our domestic economy is estimated to have grown by 1.7% in 2024 and is projected to grow by 6% this year. This 1.7% growth in 2024 was bolstered in the mining and electricity sectors, whilst agriculture, mining, construction, and electricity sectors will largely support growth in 2025. The committee also requested, made allegations to the fact that 1 in every 3 girls gets married before they reach adolescence. And I wish to highlight to this committee that there are no such statistics in Zimbabwe. Following our national census conducted in the year 2022, which we conduct every 10 years, our statistics show that 1% of women at the age of, between the age of 20 to 24 were in union before the age of 15. The proportion was higher at 1.6% in rural areas as compared to 0.5% in the urban areas. Honorable Chair, whilst we will give you the budget for the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission for the last 5 years. I would wish to highlight the budget between 2024 and 2025. In 2024, the Human Rights Commission was allocated 117,758,000 ZiG, which is our local currency. And in 2025, it was allocated a budget of 176,291,000. The 2025 allocation shows a 4.5% increase from the previous year. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. The committee noted that persons with disabilities, Fred Mabena from Minister of Labour. The committee noted that persons with disabilities continue to face indirect and multiple forms of discrimination, which hinders their equal participation in economic and social life and their access to public services. And the question was, what is the government doing to address these? The government of Zimbabwe has taken a number of measures to address those challenges. The first one being the repealing of the Disabled Persons Act. And the new bill is shifting disability from a welfare issue to a human rights issue, incorporating inclusive education, equal employment opportunities, and political participation. And point number two, the measure number two, the government is expanding the scope of coverage of disabilities to cover previously excluded classes like albinism, epilepsy, psychosocial challenges. And number three, persons with disabilities now have a parliamentary representatives who are persons with disabilities themselves, and these sit in parliament in the Senate. Point number four, the government of Zimbabwe is domesticating the convention on the rights of persons with disabilities. And point number five, the government is within the, through the act, allowing political participation with for persons with disabilities, and the language within the bill will allow even those with visual disabilities through the Braille. Point number six, the bill provides for reasonable accommodation, which is through infrastructure, inclusive education, health, employment opportunities. And the bill also establishes a fund, a disabilities fund, which is a fund where the person with disabilities can borrow to do their projects or their businesses. Then also the bill has a provision for enforcement mechanisms, because the complaint has been that whilst the law states what can be done, but there were no enforcement mechanisms, but the current bill has those enforcement mechanisms. And last but not least, the government has established a wholly, a standalone Department of Persons with Disabilities. And there is a disabilities policy that was launched in 2021 by His Excellency the President. These are the measures, Honorable Chair, that the government of Zimbabwe is taking to address the issues that have been raised by the committee. Thank you.
And thank you, Honorable Chair. My name is Meki Majata from the Ministry of Home Affairs and Cultural Heritage. The committee commented that Zimbabwe maintains a punitive approach of criminalizing the possession of drugs, and also proceeded to ask whether the National Drugs and Substance Control and Enforcement Agency Bill incorporates main harm reduction measures which would help people who use drugs to receive appropriate care and treatment. And in response to that, Zimbabwe is making significant strides towards curbing drugs and substance abuse by, on one hand, suppressing the trafficking of illegal drugs and substance, and on the other, promoting rehabilitation and reintegration of victims of drugs and substance abuse. Zimbabwe established vocational training and drug rehabilitation programs to support individual recovery and development of victims of drugs and substance abuse. As such, Zimbabwe established 18 public and private drugs rehabilitation centers where victims are referred for rehabilitation training and reintegration without facing any criminal charges. In that regard, the National Drugs and Substance Abuse Control and Enforcement Agency Bill aims, among other objectives, to establish a social cluster which coordinates access to support services such as vocational training and drug rehabilitation program to support individual recovery and development. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. The committee noted. My name is Kudakwashe Mugwagwa from the Attorney General's office representing the Ministry of Health. The committee noted the depleting resources of the National AIDS Trust Fund stemming from the decline in international support, which has caused many HIV programs ineffective or defunct due to funding limitations and created protection service gaps. In response, the government of Zimbabwe has taken deliberate measures to supplement the National AIDS Trust Fund through increased domestic budget allocations to the health sector, with a particular focus on sustaining HIV programs. This reflects our recognition that the fight against HIV and AIDS is a matter of national priority, which cannot rely solely on donor support. The AIDS levy, a 3% tax on personal and corporate income, remains a cornerstone of domestic financing. Since its inception, it has mobilized over 100 million directly funding antiretroviral therapy, prevention of mother-to-child transmission, and community outreach programs. To reinforce these mechanisms, efforts are underway to strengthen collective systems, broaden its coverage, and ensure that every financial institution is raised and is channeled towards high-impact interventions. These combined efforts have yielded results which include reduction of 11.3% from a peak of over 25% in the late 1990s, and over 1.3 million people are on lifelong antiretroviral therapy. Mother-to-child transmission rates have declined to below 8% compared to over 30% over the 2 decades. AIDS-related deaths have dropped by more than 60% in the past decade. Madam Chairperson, Zimbabwe has demonstrated resilience through its commitment to domestic resource mobilization anchored in the AIDS levy and increased budget allocations. I think.
My name is Imbai Nyemba. I'm the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm going to speak on statistics on impact of sanctions on the economy. The gross domestic product. There's sharp economic contraction during the period from 2000 through 2008. This period saw negative growth rates with key sectors like agriculture, which once contributed up to 17% to GDP, and mining, as well as manufacturing, severely impacted by the downturn. Since their inception in 2000, the country has lost approximately US 21 billion by the end of 2018 in potential GDP. This is the impact of UMCs. We have lost over United States 42 billion in revenue, US 4.5 billion in bilateral donor support annually since 2001, United States 12 billion in loans from the IMF, World Bank, and the African Development Bank, and 18 billion United States dollars in international commercial loans. I now go to foreign direct investment. Inflows drastically dropped from 404.3 million in 1998 to 3.8 million US dollars during this sanction period. The sanctions, sorry, my apologies. The sanctions also severely limited Zimbabwe's international credit and investment access. This stifled foreign direct investment, with inflows dropping from an annual average of 95 United States million dollars in the 1990 to just 20 million post 2000. Trade volumes. Loss of markets in countries such as the United States, the United Kingdom, and the European Union led to a collapse in export competitiveness. This was further exacerbated by Zimbabwe's exclusion from initiatives such as the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which could have promoted exports to the United States. Exports shrank from 2.4 billion United States dollars recorded in 1996 to United States dollars 1.5 billion post year 2000. Capacity utilization. The country has experienced a steep decline from 70 to 76% in the period before the imposition of such sanctions to an all-time low of 10% during the peak of sanctions. Currency fluctuations. This was high during the period 2005 to 2009, where the Zimbabwe dollar almost became moribund. May I also refer this committee to the report of the United Nations Special Rapporteur on unilateral coercive measures, which clearly details how these unjustified measures have impacted the economy of the affected countries and the human rights agenda. There was a question on inflation and a highlight that 1 in every 3 in Zimbabwe is languishing in severe poverty. I think that has been addressed. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we,
there was a question that was raised. Honorable Chair, there was a question that was posed regarding inspections within the workplaces. The issue was, despite the existence of occupational safety and health measures on the ground, workers continue to face challenges and injuries and death at times. And the question was, do you have, or how many inspectors do you have? In Zimbabwe, there are principally 3 categories or departments that do inspections at workplaces. Firstly, there is the Minister of Mines. The Minister of Mines inspectors, they predominantly inspect mines and other metallurgical complexes. So they have got 66 inspectors on their own. Then the Minister of Labor itself has 249 inspectors, including designated agents who are employees of national employment agencies, who are part of the whole inspectorate system. Then the National Social Security Authority also does inspections across the board in public and private workplaces. They have 161 inspectors. So I think there is a robust inspectorate system where there are inspectors in place in all those 3 departments of government. Thank you.
Monica.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Monica Vimbai Hanga. I am a labor attaché in the Zimbabwe Permanent Mission here in Geneva. There was a question on the gender pay gaps and the equality between men and women in the workplace. In terms of the legislative provisions to ensure equality between men and women in the labor market, Section 5 of the Labor Act was amended in 2023 to align it with Section 65, subsection 6 of the Constitution, which provides for equal remuneration for men and women for work of similar value. Although the Act previously enshrined this principle, the recent amendments were to take into consideration the comments from the supervisory bodies of the International Labour Organization concerning equality of treatment for men and women, particularly the implementation of ILO Conventions 100 and 111 on equality of treatment and non-discrimination, which Zimbabwe has ratified and is up to date in its reporting obligations. The Labour Act of 2003 now provides for every employer to pay equal remuneration to men and female employees for work to which equal value is attributed without discrimination on the grounds of sex and gender, and there are no gender pay gaps in Zimbabwe. Then just to add also, there was a question on child labor to say the minimum for admission into any employment in Zimbabwe is 16 years, and this is provided for in Section 11 of the Labor Act. Admission for apprenticeship, there was also a question. We want to add that it starts at 16 years, and the Labor Act prohibits work for persons below 18, which is hazardous to their health, safety, and morals. This ensures that children complete basic education at 16 years before entering the labor market. The legislative provisions in Zimbabwe are above those given in the ILO Conventions number 138 on minimum age and Convention 182 on the worst forms of child labor, which Zimbabwe has both ratified, and they set the minimum at 15. Then concerning the collective job action on essential services, the Constitution of Zimbabwe provides workers with the right to resort to collective job action in Section 65, subsection 3. A question came in terms of the Declaration of Essential Services, just to indicate that we have contained in Statutory Instrument 137 of 2003 the category of work which is classified as essential service, and also to add by saying the tripartite negotiating forum, which is governed by an act of parliament, is consulted before the minister puts in place the statutory instrument. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think the outstanding questions, Madam Chair, have been answered. I just wanted to refer the HIV AIDS question. Mshamiri can you mention briefly about the milestones, the achievements that have been made, maybe in a minute. The 95 achievement, I think it was not captured.
98.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Thank you, Honorable Minister. My name is Mshamir Edward with the Ministry of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. With reference to Zimbabwe's government's effort to combat the HIV and AIDS situation, the government of Zimbabwe has managed to achieve the World Health Organization standard of 95 as of 1 December 2023, and has in the current situation set a target of 98. By 98, it's reference to 98% of persons living with HIV know their status, and 98% of persons who know their status are on antiretroviral therapy. And of the 98% who are on antiretroviral therapy, have got a viral suppression load, which means they can no longer transmit the virus. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much. I thought that was important because there was an assertion that there was a depletion. These are statistics from WHO to indicate the milestone achievements that the country has made. Honorable Chair, I think we have answered the questions to the best of our ability, and I hand over to you for further deliberations.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and really deeply appreciate responses from you and your delegation to the questions that were posed yesterday. I will now open the floor for follow-up questions, and I recognize Mr. Siri Nonthasut, who is in charge of Cluster 3. So we will take follow-up questions under Cluster 3. Mr. Nonthasut, followed by Mr. Winfer, and of course the floor is still open. Sir, you have the floor.
Good morning, and I'm thankful to the Zimbabwean delegation for the information provided. I have reactions and a few follow-up questions. The first one is on poverty. I'm astonished by the numbers that have been provided. So if I gather correctly, the cumulative impact of the sanction from 2002 to 2008 is 17% to the GDP. Yet the growth rate last year was 1.7%. This year is projected to be 6%. That is quite astonishing. The point concerning poverty is this. When we look at poverty, we look at a whole. So we look at measures that you would be put in place to ensure that you have equitable distribution from Harare to the rural areas as well. So that is a follow-up question on the point on poverty. On child marriage, I think we are concerned particularly on child marriage because there is a law in 2022, yet there are incidences. Now, there is a divergence between the statistics that have been quoted, that is to be sorted, but yet the delegation also recognized that in the rural area, 1.6% of child marriage exist. So we are concerned about the effectiveness of the law and how you have implemented that particular legislation to ensure that there would be no incidents on child marriage. And this also concerned with child labor as well. If you can provide additional statistics on child labor, that would be helpful. Thirdly, on people who use drugs, we know that there is an upcoming legislation, and I'm thankful to the information provided that there are 80 rehab centers, both private and public. But we have received reports that people who use drugs, including people with HIV/AIDS, if they don't want to face criminal justice system, they are involuntarily put into psychiatric ward, not these rehab centers. So the question is whether or not they have the choice to be put in these rehab centers, or their choice is limited or non-existent when they are put in psychiatric ward. I have some follow-up questions which pertain not just the cluster 3, but perhaps hark back to the previous 2 clusters that have not been responded to. We asked question about the fully paid maternity leave for working mothers as guaranteed under your constitution and Section 18 of the labor law. We would like the delegation to provide information on the measures taken to ensure that working mothers in all sectors, including civil sectors and those working in informal economy, can fully exercise this particular constitutional right in practice. Secondly, we would appreciate if you provide information on whether there is a statutory parental leave or paternity leave in your country. There are 3 additional questions, Madam Chair, that I would like to put forward to the delegation. One is on cluster 1, domestic application of the covenant. We would really appreciate if you can provide the examples of cases which our covenant can be invoked before or directly applied in your domestic courts. Secondly, under Article 2, non-discrimination and equality, do you have in place a comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation that prohibits all forms of discrimination on the basis of all prohibited grounds, including sexual orientation and gender identity? And thirdly, pertaining also to non-discrimination and inequality, what are the measures taken by the Zimbabwean government to combat discrimination, social stigma, and prejudice against lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex persons, as well as those living with HIV/AIDS, to support their equal access to employment, social services, housing, education, and healthcare, particularly the measures taken by the state party to prevent and address discriminatory practices such as evictions, bullying, and violence at schools, expulsions, and denial of healthcare and services due to their real or perceived sexual orientation, gender identity, or HIV status. Those are my reactions and follow-up questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nantasur. Mr. Winfer.
Good morning, also your second day here. I have two follow-up questions to cluster 3 and to get some more insights from you in both aspects. The first one is related to the number of children being hungry. And I mentioned this already yesterday evening to you. Yeah, I followed your own statistics, which is saying you still have 27% of all the kids are stunted. Yeah, so chronically hunger, which is 1/4 of youth in your country. Those who are wasted, so which are suddenly or on a short term hungry, is about 4%, and both is taken from your own statistics. One is the Livelihood Assessment Committee, which has published the data on wasting, and the other is on your democratic and health status from 2024 both. So it's also echoed with the same figures I found with the Food and Agriculture Organization. I think that's similar or a bit lower than your neighboring countries, but still I would be interesting. You were in your response saying you have started now to include more social services to particular families and all your support programs to farmers. Just to get an idea, when did you start with all these programs? What do you expect maybe as results? And do you think that's all the right programs, or what would be additionally needed or envisaged from your side, maybe to make additional progress in this aspect? Yeah, that would be very interesting. My second question, maybe you can explain a bit more. It's about, well, it's 25 years of your fast-track land reform. Yeah, and this has been heavily debated nationally and internationally. And I would be really interesting and get a good overview, yeah, how you make an assessment now after this 25 years. What I have observed, and you might all correct what, is that you have distributed maybe something like 20% of the land in your country. There was from big landowners to a lot of farmers, millions have benefited, and you have also described yesterday how much tenure security you have increased. Yeah, so. And you have also said it was needed because there was a reduction of, let's say, of harvest in many of that land distributed, that you have started to have these support programs. You mentioned the presidential support program. And then you said you have also an additional 5 KJ program started some years ago. So what is your overall assessment, first on the one aspect of productivity, but also on the justice of land distribution? And you were also criticized in international literature that, well, the distribution was reaching out to millions of farmers, but it was also not totally equal for all to have access to this. Maybe what do you think about this forms of discussion? I raised this question because I would be really interested in the sense of a constructive dialogue to get your assessment of the situation, because it has been so much discussed. You have been criticized internally, externally on these things, and maybe it's a good moment to just hold in for and make a 25-year summary where you are and what you expect would be the next steps. Yeah? And for us as a committee, it's extremely interesting because it's one of the more forward or more substantive land reform programs we can observe worldwide. Yeah? So for us, it's interesting to get your views on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Winfer. Ms. Perez.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you very much, Madam. May I extend a warm welcome to the delegation of Zimbabwe to this second working day. Good morning to each and everyone. I would like to thank you for the information which you submitted in a timely fashion, and in particular enshrined in your answers to the questions that we had sent previously and which we received back in March 2025. I am also endeavoring to get more information for myself about cluster 3 and in particular the right to food. In your responses to the list of issues, you tell us that you have programs to mitigate, so mitigating programs for households who suffer from food insecurity, especially in the rural areas. So what programs have been funded by civil society organizations and partner organizations? So these have been funded, but given that you've described a context wherein there are difficulties because of the sanctions imposed, the UCMs from outside of Zimbabwe, can you still, given the circumstances, can you still fund these programs, or have been forced to turn to other sources of funding to support those programs? We are particularly concerned about the figures that have been published on the SDG portals on the one hand, but also in the latest reports from the FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organization, in 2025, according to which 68.8% of the population in Zimbabwe in 2025 suffered from food insecurity. So either moderate or acute, which is 11.2 million people. This is undoubtedly a large problem which is linked to poverty and that could give rise to interesting growth prospects, as Mr. Windfor said, in terms of investments in agricultural projects happening as a result of the situation. These would be my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Perez. Are there any other requests? I see none at this stage, Your Excellency. So request you to kindly respond to the follow-up questions that have been posed by colleagues. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will answer some of the questions, but the approach today would be that I will request my team to also participate in answering the questions. The first one were statistics that were, he said, were quite astonishing on the GDP that was given, the reduction in the growth rate, and he speaks about the poverty wall that is in place and what is being done about that. I will request my official from Minister of Labor to answer after my response. But basically, let me preface my answer by saying that in terms of food self-sufficiency, we have done quite a lot. We make sure that all our rural households that are recorded, we give them packages so that they assist government by growing their own food. And it has been a very successful program. Why am I saying it's successful? Because we've requested those that were given packages to give back 10 kg of grain. And when I left Harare, I think we had close to 90,000 metric tons that was being given by those that received grain. So the whole that is perceived is not consistent with what is on the ground. We had a very good rainy season this past year. The previous year, we had a drought, which we mitigated by ensuring that when we had our winter wheat crop, we did import substitution by giving out our wheat that we grew. And we have statistics to indicate that when we were hit by drought, we decided to increase our capacity of wheat production. And in Africa, I think we are now second only to Ethiopia in terms of wheat production. So that is not an indication of a whole but an indication of improvements towards realizing self-sufficiency in terms of provision of food. But there may be logistical issues in the distribution of grain. Our country is such that there are regions where you can grow grain. And these are the regions historically where silos to store grain were built. So what was a problem was the logistics of transporting the grain now to other regions. But what we have started doing now, we have started building silos in all the regions so that we store grain close to where people are. And then you spoke about child marriages. I would want to know from your experience, if you put legislation that ban child marriages and you have enforcement agencies, what more can be done besides advocacy and having an adequate law? Perhaps you can give us from your experiences what can be done besides having a law, enforcement agencies and advocacies. What can be done to ensure that we outrightly eliminate child marriages? Perhaps my team will also be able to respond to that. And again, we now have, in terms of drug and substance abuse, we have the harm reduction side and the supply reduction side. Those that we feel need rehabilitation are not being prosecuted. They are being put into rehab centers so that they are rehabilitated. We are not putting them into psychiatric units because our psychiatric units, they are oversubscribed. So we are moving towards ensuring that all those that we believe need rehabilitation go to rehabilitation centers. And in our earlier response yesterday, we spoke about converting some of our vocational training centers to become rehab centers, or those centers that we used to hold people during COVID. We are converting them to ensure that we carry out rehabilitation centers. And on maternity leave, I'm not sure what the problem is, because the awareness that is there both in public and private sector is very good. I am not aware of any private sector employers who are denying their employees full paid maternity leave. And you spoke about something very interesting about statutory paternal leave. I think this committee is about economic and cultural rights. I think you must indulge certain cultures and say, do we have a culture in that country where men will stay at home because there is a new baby? Our men are motivated to work when they receive a new baby. I think it's a cultural thing. So we should not be forced to adhere to cultural norms that do not appeal to us. So I think you have to indulge me in that regard. And domestication, application of domestic covenants in our domestic courts, I'm sure I'm going to leave that to some of my very good and competent lawyers. Then you spoke about non-discrimination because of sexuality, sexual orientation. I think, again, culturally and as a country, we don't ask you your sexual orientation when you are looking for employment. So I think we'll be going overboard to ask us things that we do not ask. So what you do behind doors, we don't want to know, but we prohibit same-sex marriages. That's our culture. And I believe this committee, part of your job is to ensure that you preserve our cultural values, diverse as we are, and not to impose cultures that do not appeal to us. So as a people, we don't ask what you do behind doors. But when you decide that you want to marry a man, you then have to find a society, because our society refrain from such behavior. So I think as a committee, your mandate must look at how you accommodate different cultures and preserve the cultural values from the diversity of peoples around the world. Then there was a question about number of children being hungry, the statistical issues. I think this also requires some statistical analysis. I would defer to my team to assist in that regard. And then there was an interesting question about the land reform, 25 years post-land reform, assessment of the progress. I think the land reform was a huge success. When we took up arms to fight, it was because our land was taken. And then we didn't have legislation on how to take it, and we decided to do what we could. And I think it's completed. The statistics that we have on the ground, we now have record tobacco production on our farms, record grain production on our farms. We now have farmers that were given land, their livelihoods have been uplifted. I think these statistics we will be able to furnish to indicate what has happened. And now we are in the process, we have already started, of ensuring that those farmers that were given farms are given loans by our banks, the so-called starter packs, to have irrigation on their plots so that they can do farming all year round. And we believe this will also increase further productivity. Like I indicated, in terms of wheat production, we are now second to Ethiopia in Africa, which is a very good milestone. We now grow the majority. We used to import wheat for our bread. Now we no longer import, but I think we can give very good statistics on the success story of our land reform. And then the last question, my translation failed me. I didn't get the first part. I hope my team got it and will be able to assist to respond to that. So I will start by the first question. If my team can help, Mr. Mabena from Social Welfare, if you got something, just a minute so that we don't spend a lot of time.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Just to add to the issues of food, the right to food, I'll throw in the figures. In 2023 to 2024 season, there was no drought in Zimbabwe. The food distribution was limited to a number in our report, 720,000 metric tons. That report is confirmed by the annual report by the WFP, because we work in collaboration. Basically, the success was because of what we have already indicated, that the government took measures to give input to most of the rural and resettled farmers to do their own, to produce their own food. So as long as there is no drought or exogenous factors, Zimbabweans have been able to do to produce their own food. But if you come to 2024-2025 agricultural season, the total number of people who were provided with the food is 6.2 million. That already shows you that there is a huge gap between those two figures that I'm throwing around. The reason basically was there was a huge drought, bad drought. And the drought is a natural phenomenon where no matter you've got inputs, no matter you've got everything that you need, there's nothing that you really can do beyond that, because it's natural. There are no rains. Even the water bodies, they are not or they were not good enough to sustain the whole country. So when the drought came, Zimbabwe didn't simply sit on their laurels. The government provided the food to every household that need was food insufficiency. So the starting point would be to make an assessment of who are the vulnerable groups that need food, the elderly, the persons with disabilities, the children, the women, and even the able-bodied. At times you find they were also covered in that group, to the extent that this provision of food covered not only the rural persons, it also extended to urban areas. Those people were also provided with food handouts. So the food mitigation program that Zimbabwe came up with managed to close the gap between those without, and no one really would go hungry. I think that's basically what I would say. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Maybe Stanley, can you give a further insights on how poverty in Zimbabwe is calculated using the poverty lines briefly, so that
My name is Stanley from the Office of the President and Cabinet. I just wanted to shed some light on the comment that was made on whether the statistics that were provided on poverty lines in Zimbabwe would be believable or not. I think there's a general condition that is applied globally on how poverty is calculated. And I don't think that there's a particular way in which it is calculated in Zimbabwe, different from any other country. And looking at the fact that these statistics came from a reputable body, we also had to believe in them. And we also had some questions for them. But I want to highlight that poverty in Zimbabwe is calculated using national poverty lines. And what matters in that case is how we look at distribution in terms of poverty severity index, headcount ratios, and poverty gap. In that case, I think it's a normal phenomenon that poverty is not the same in an urban area, in a rural area. But when we analyze that data, we analyze it by obtaining household income and also, expenditure surveys, where that data is disaggregated by region, by social groups, by gender, by age, etc. But we also look at income inequality and how that relates to expenditures below the poverty data line. So if you look at that, there's there's no uniformity in how that how you can achieve figures in terms of the calculation of poverty. But so what we presented here is what we believe is an average, and that average differs from time to time, depending on what's really affecting the country or influencing poverty at that particular time. The country may have issues with unemployment, but in a particular area, it may not be unemployment that is really affecting. It may be drought, it may be seasonal issues. So I just wanted to highlight that despite the ongoing challenges in Zimbabwe, our country has made significant progress in reducing poverty in recent years. If you were looking at data in 2008 and you look at it now, there's been significant progress. And it's particularly with targeted social protection programs and economic reforms, which our economic reforms have not been very speedy because of economic sanctions. We have made economic reforms, but some of them have not really achieved what we wanted in time because of sanctions. But that has helped more people access basic needs and improve their standard of living. And just to put it right, I don't think that there are people in Zimbabwe who have died because they couldn't put food on the table. And that effort is commendable on the part of the government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Who else? You want to? The applicability of? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. You raised the issue of the applicability of the covenant. So I'll just speak to how it applies in Zimbabwe. As you know that we have got the monist philosophy in application of this governance, especially in developed countries, especially the Euro-American bloc. Then in other countries, especially most of those from the South, we've got what we call the dualist, philosophy of application of these, where after a covenant has been signed, by a state party, there is need for a country to get approval from its parliament for it to be applicable and within its jurisdiction. So Zimbabwe is a dualist state. So if you look at our constitution, which we commonly refer to as the Lancaster House Constitution, it didn't have an expanded Bill of Rights which touched on economic and social cultural rights. But in 1991, when we got independence, Zimbabwe then acceded to the International Covenant on Economic and Social Cultural Rights. And that on its own, in my view, is supposed to be applauded. And when we did accede, we did not just stop there. We then caused a constitutional making process in 2013. And if you look at that constitution now, it has got a broad framework of economic and social cultural rights, the rights which were not enshrined in the Lancaster House Constitution. So we've got a chapter 4, which is quite comprehensive in with regards to these economic, social and cultural right. But there was an inquiry to say, how does then now become implementable within your jurisdiction? So the constitution on its own, it allows for a broad framework now of approaching the constitutional code, because chapter 4 is justiciable, meaning to say that an ordinary person can just go to the constitutional court, which decide on constitutional matters, where among other classifications, when you violate the provisions of chapter 4, one can approach the constitutional court, meaning to say you've got the direct local stand in the constitutional court for you to sue on the basis of the violation of a right. It might be the right to food, etc., etc. But the government further, now revisited the pieces of legislations which were there, and also formulated new pieces of legislation to align with the 2013 constitutional framework, which was now broad. So all these rights which are talking about housing, water and sanitation, etc., etc. Now someone can go to the constitutional court and then sue on that basis. And we also have enabling legislation now, which is very, very clear. So enabling legislation, because in other countries, like the monist state, once you have ratified or acceded, you can raise a statutory instrument to implement the covenant. But in our case, you revisit the constitution itself, you revisit a plethora of pieces of legislation so that you incorporate. That's the reason why the Honorable Minister was talking of having that we revisited most of our pieces of legislation to ensure that these pieces of legislation, and these, again, you realize that even though our jurisprudence is now broadening, because these cases are now trickling, they're now coming before the Constitutional Court. We've got a plethora of cases. I have some of them here. As someone who deal with them, I've got Farai Mushoriwa versus City of Harare. This was about the right to water. We've got also Mavis Marange versus Chitungweza Municipality and Glory to Glory Housing Cooperative. This is about housing and the general services which are provided for by local authorities. St. George's College Parents and Teachers Association. This is about right to education. As colleagues have talked much about the right, the Education Act, which is expanded. I submit, Chair.
Thank you. Just to add to say that if you go into our constitution, what he was alluding to on chapter 4 of the constitution, section 46, subsection 3, it says, when interpreting this chapter, a court, tribunal, or forum or body must take into account international law and all treaties and conventions to which Zimbabwe is a party. So when you are interpreting now this, and you have to have a look at all the conventions that are Zimbabwe as a party and interpret it holistically. I saw Farai, you wanted to add, or it's now a different matter?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to add following submissions by Stanley, that in terms of equitable distribution of income in Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe is recognized as one of the countries in the region with a relatively equitable distribution of income. In 2011, the Gini coefficient after taxes and transfers was recorded at 43.2%, indicating a moderate level of inequality within the population. Although this measure of inequality has shown some fluctuations over time, it's important to view these changes within the context of ongoing efforts to promote social equity in the country and economic development. And in 2017, the Gini coefficient increased to 44.3%, and this trend has continued to grow, reaching a level of 50.3% in recent years. Thank you.
I think the PS would want to have some intervention.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Honorable Minister. I simply wanted to talk about the issue of homosexuality, which you, Honorable Minister, has spoken about eloquently and ably. I want to add that in Zimbabwe, there have not been reports of harassment of homosexuals. And the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, whose chairperson is in here, is in their reports, there has not been any mention of any harassment of people, of homosexual people. They actually have got their associations which are known, but in terms of our constitution, our law, and our culture, they can't marry. With the indulgence of my minister, maybe the chairperson of the commission can confirm if my statement is correct. If you can confirm.
Honorable Minister and Honorable Chair, I do wish to confirm that the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, as one of its functions, is enjoined to receive complaints and reports from the public pertaining to various human rights violations. And I can confirm that in the years, in the recent, we have not been, among the reports that we receive, we have not received complaints of harassment through homophobia. But we not only wait for complaints to be received, we also monitor the human rights situation, and where we see violations, we also intervene. And I can confirm that the issue of harassment and attacks and victimization of people of a of different sexual orientation is not, from our estimation as the National Human Rights Institution, an issue that is that is live, and that is a problem as such, because the laws, both the Constitution as well as even the criminal law prohibit any forms of attacks or harassment on anyone whatsoever. The right to security of the person is firmly entrenched in, I believe it's Section 50 of the Constitution, and the Criminal Codification and Law Reform Act applies to absolutely everyone. There is no, so should any attacks or harassment occur, the police should also take reports, but in our monitoring as well as our reporting, we have not encountered that to be a problem, and we are confident that if there is any also a problem, the public is free to report to us or to even the associations that the permanent secretary mentioned. There's one that is particularly prominent, the Gays and Lesbians of Zimbabwe. They also are very active and looking out for their members, and they've also not given us any reports. So in terms of harassment, and as they did say, the issue is that marriage is what is prohibited by the Constitution, marriage per se, but also even any attacks also even by heterosexual people. It absolutely, there is application of the law, but there is no, it doesn't seem to be an issue that is, how can I call it, festering or causing problems. But the good thing is that if there's any harassment, the law adequately provides for that, and all law enforcement agencies are enjoined to receive reports, and the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission also is waiting, and also even sometimes looks out for matters, but we have not encountered them. Thank you.
Any further interventions from the team? Any further? I think we, Madam Chair, we have exhausted this segment. I think we hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, and thank you to the delegation and to you for very meticulously going through the follow-up questions that were raised and the patience and the details with which you have responded. Very grateful to you, and thank you so much for that. We now turn to Cluster 4, and I will request our task force in charge, Mr. Giuseppe Parmisano, to kindly pose his questions under Cluster 4. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I would like to renew my welcome to the distinguished delegation of Zimbabwe, and also thank the government of Zimbabwe for submitting relevant and useful information in its replies to the list of issues. Cluster 4 relates to Article 13, 14, and 15 of the Covenant. It covers the right to education, the right to take part in cultural life, and the right to enjoy the benefits of scientific progress. As the person responsible for the cluster, I will focus on some key issues of this thematic area that require attention and clarification. I will start by discussing the general situation regarding the right to education. As for enrollment, completion, and dropout rates at primary and secondary level, while government figures show an overall improvement in recent years, particularly in primary school and the first years of secondary school, they also reveal very high and worrying levels of non-completion and school absence in the final years of secondary school. In addition, a 2021 report by UNICEF indicates that only 15% of children in Zimbabwe complete upper secondary education, with children belonging to the poorest quintile and those living in rural areas having particularly low completion rates, and girls being particularly unlikely to complete this level of education. The replies to the list of issues mention some measures being taken to prevent children from dropping out of primary school and to encourage their enrollment in primary school, but they do not provide information about secondary school. Barriers such as the cost of education, a lack of registration documents, early marriages and teenage pregnancies, as well as opportunity costs such as gold panning or crossing to neighboring countries for economic gain, continue to impede the right to upper secondary education. So my first question is, what is the government doing to address these issues? What steps does it intend to take to extend the right to free education to include upper secondary education? Then, a crucial yet specific issue in this respect is the re-entry of pregnant girls and adolescent mothers into education. In 2020, the Education Amendment Act was enacted containing provisions allowing this. This is indeed a positive step forward, particularly in a country where child marriage is also a concern. However, protecting pregnant girls and adolescent mothers who re-enter the school system is essential for their successful reintegration and positive learning outcomes. There, I would like to ask the delegation to inform the committee of the measures that the government is implementing to prevent the stigmatization and emotional abuse of pregnant girls and adolescent mothers within the school system. Third point, in order to improve the educational system and make progress in realizing the right to education, the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education introduced the non-formal education and reintegration policy in 2015. This policy aims to promote quality and inclusive education, as well as providing functional skills to adult learners, young people, and out-of-school children. Under this policy, several avenues for second chance education are proposed. Could the distinguished delegation please provide more information on how the policy is implemented and on the results achieved? In particular, what efforts has the government made to raise awareness of the non-formal education program, including the Learning Passport and other digital learning platforms, and to popularize it among potential learners, especially those in remote and marginalized rural areas? What concrete measures has the government put in place to ensure that schools and teachers are well-resourced and informed to competently deliver the non-formal education route? One more general problematic issue is the significant underfunding of education in the national budget. Inadequate school infrastructure is a result of this underfunding. This includes unreliable access to electricity, water, and sanitation facilities. Another consequence is the emigration of teachers due to their low salaries. Could you please clarify the proportion of the national budget allocated to education and whether there are measures in place to increase this funding in order to reduce problems such as inadequate infrastructure and low teacher salaries? And unfortunately, the report and replies to the list of issues do not provide any statistics or figures regarding the education of vulnerable children, including orphans and children from indigent families. However, they do refer to measures such as collaborating with education partners to pay fees and levies for vulnerable children, and to BEAM, the Basic Education Assistance Module, which provides school and examination fees, levies, and building assistance to learners. Could you please elaborate further on such measures? Programs like BEAM only provide school fees, yet these vulnerable children have other important needs besides tuition fees. Could you therefore clarify how the government plans to address these additional needs of children whose fees are paid under BEAM or similar arrangements? With regard to the right to education, I would like to raise one final point. During the reference period, several attacks on education in Zimbabwe were documented, involving the use of schools by armed force and non-state armed groups. In this regard, in its concluding observations on Zimbabwe in 2016, the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child called for measures to deter the military or political use of schools, as well as for the establishment of mechanisms to monitor and investigate allegations of attacks on educational facilities. So my questions are, what measures has the government taken to prevent the military or political use of schools and to set up systems for monitoring and investigating allegations of attacks on educational institutions? And secondly, are there any policies, rules, or training programs for Zimbabwe's armed force that protect schools from military use? I turn now to Article 15 of the Covenant and Cultural Rights. Section 16 of the Constitution broadens the definition of official languages to include many indigenous languages. Further, Section 63 of the Constitution provides that every person has the right to use the language of their choice and to participate in the cultural life of their choice. In this respect, the Education Act empowers the Minister for Sport, Arts and Recreation, if I'm not mistaken, to authorize the teaching of indigenous languages in schools, in addition to Shona, Ndebele, and English, in areas where they are spoken. Could the delegation clarify what the concrete outcomes have been of the Minister's power to grant such authorization? What progress has been made regarding the teaching of indigenous languages in schools? In addition, some indigenous peoples, including the Tsawa and Doma, if I'm not mistaken, as well as minority groups, are not officially recognized as such. Consequently, they do not benefit from legal framework or other measures that protect their cultural rights. could you please confirm whether this understanding of the situation is correct? And if so, could you please provide information on the measures the government intends to take to protect the cultural rights of such indigenous peoples and minority groups and enable them to maintain their culture and way of life or sustain their traditional livelihoods? And lastly, with regard to the benefits of scientific progress and its application. Available data and reliable research show that many people, particularly those in rural areas and low-income households, lack the digital skills needed to fully benefit from information and communication technology. Could you please inform the committee of the steps the government is taking, if any, to address this problem, which exacerbates the digital divide and limits access to essential services and economic opportunities? With that, I finish, at least for the time being. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Pavisano. Your Excellency, we'll take a 5-minute break for you to organize your work so that you can distribute the answers accordingly. So we'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Your attention, please, dear colleagues and distinguished delegation. We will now resume our meeting. You heard the questions from our colleague on Cluster 4. The floor is now open, sir, for you and your delegation to respond to the questions posed by Mr. Pamisano. You have the floor, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the comprehensive questions. We appreciate your feedback. I will request my officials to respond first, and then I will summarize, sum up later. So can we proceed? Introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable. I am Shangu Tariro, Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education. And I will start with the question on why we have low enrollment rates at upper secondary. And I will respond to that saying the first thing is our education system is transitional. It's not automatic. You don't just move from lower secondary to upper secondary. So some pupils or learners, so to say, they choose not to proceed to upper secondary level and opt to go and maybe work, especially those who are coming from low income families. And that's why we then have a low enrollment rate at upper secondary as compared to our lower secondary. And also, we have those, since we say it's transitional, some of them, it's lack of preparedness. They can't proceed to upper secondary when they don't have adequate academic skills from lower secondary. That's the other reason why we then have that gap in enrollment rates at lower secondary and upper secondary. And there was also a question on why we don't have our free education, we call it basic education, extended to upper secondary. If you go to our constitution on section 75, it mandates the state to provide basic state-funded education. And from our definition, our basic education is education that we have from early childhood development level to lower secondary level. So I will quote the words of our honorable head of delegation yesterday when he said, we eat what we hunt. So we cannot expect to eat a beast when we've hunted a rabbit. So the government is actually progressively providing for basic education. So right now, what we have is sufficient for the basic education, which is ECD to lower secondary. And funds permitting, we'll definitely consider providing state-funded education even to upper secondary. And then we move on to the issue of safety guidelines, maybe for the pregnant girls. Our section 68 of our Education Act, it actually prohibits the exclusion of pupils on the basis of pregnancy. And it actually compels all responsible authorities to allow pregnant pupils to remain enrolled and to continue with their education during and after childbirth. And from this, we can actually see that we don't take it for granted that we educate even the pregnant girls. So you find that our laws intact and they provide for the safety of the pregnant girls. And we have recently gazetted a statutory instrument number 13 of 2025, which then provides the detailed guidelines on how we take care of the pregnant girls in the school. There was also a question on the issue of BEAM And as the government of Zimbabwe, to prevent school dropouts, we ensure and to ensure the regular attendance of pupils, we've been implementing also, in addition to the basic assistance education module, we've also been implementing the grant in aid of tuition program, a strategic intervention which is aimed at enhancing access to education for pupils from disadvantaged backgrounds. And this one is being rolled out in a phased manner, initially targeting satellite schools, and now it has been expanded to include what we term P3 and S3 schools. With P3 schools, we are referring to primary schools, which are predominantly located in rural and communal areas, enrolling children mostly from low-income families. And then similarly with S3 schools, this refers to secondary schools in the same rural and under-resourced settings, catering primarily to learners from economically disadvantaged households. So in the first phase, the program prioritized the most vulnerable and undeserved education institutions, with a deliberate focus on promoting inclusivity and equity. And to date, this initiative is supporting 119,704 pupils in satellite schools, which are typically found in remote and newly resettled areas. And we have 651,961 pupils from the P3 schools, those primary schools that we've defined, and also 284,285 pupils from the S3 schools. And by targeting these categories, the government basically is seeking to alleviate the financial burden of tuition cost on families and to reduce the dropout rates and also promote inclusive, equitable, and quality education for children in Zimbabwe's marginalized communities. And also, we have a school financing policy, which is coming out very soon. And this one, it actually aims to operationalize the basic state-funded education that we've mentioned about that is provided for in Section 75 of our Constitution. And we also have, sorry, we are turning to the question on languages. There was a question on the steps that the minister has taken on the issues of the 16 languages, official languages that we have in Zimbabwe, and would like to advise the committee that we have recently introduced the heritage-based curriculum, and this curriculum introduced the 16 official languages as learning areas for all school levels. So it's from early development childhood level up to upper secondary school. And to this effect, the ministry developed indigenous language syllabuses for these levels in English, and they are then translated to the 16 official languages, including sign language. And so far, the languages that are being offered by the curriculum are Chishona, Isindebele, Kalanga, Tonga, Venda, Sesotho, Changani, Chewa, Chibare, Khoisan, Nambian, Dao, Sign Language, Tswana, and English, of course. And then our examination board actually now assesses the languages, the following languages for grade 7 ordinary level and the advanced level, which is our upper secondary. So for grade 7, we have 9 languages that are now being assessed. And then from lower secondary, that is Form 1 to 4, we have 8 languages. And we actually going to have our first O-level SOTO paper this year. And then for upper secondary level, we have 5 languages that are being used to assess during the examinations. So they are gradual plans, though, to ensure that all the 16 languages will be examined by our examination board in the near future. Okay. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. To add to what my distinguished sister was alluding to, there was a question that was posed on minority groups as being not being officially recognized in our country. And I would like to respond to that, saying that for as long as those minority groups are within our country, we have made strides to protect their cultural heritage through, first of all, we are conducting oral interviews of elderly within different minority groups and trying to archive and then preserve such tradition for the benefits of the young ones. Then also we have gone further to establish community archives initiatives which are done at grassroots level. And with those ones, we also involved the elderly who are well versed with different cultural norms for the benefit of preserving their heritage. And we are also digitalizing endangered collections. Different cultures has got different collections that we may want to preserve for the benefit of future generations. And those are the ones that we are then digitalizing. And the frequently used ones, we try to minimize physical handling by that digitalization. Then also, if we look into our national broadcaster, we have a culture of now disseminating information in the 16 languages that have been highlighted earlier on. And we have what you call our national FM. Information is disseminated in all the 16 languages in that radio broadcaster. And we also have our community radio stations where information and culture is disseminated differently depending on the community where the radio station is housed. Then when it comes to the news, our Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation now broadcasts news in different 14 languages. So we are still developing to at least cover all the 16 languages. So I think as far as we are concerned on this one, I may rest my case on this one, or if others feel that they may add something. I thank you.
Thank you. Any further interventions from the team? Any further interventions? I think the other intervention really is that we have a tradition that we started where every year we have a culture month, which the highlight being the president will launch the culture month, and during that month we encourage all cultures to exhibit what they do. So we encourage the expression, so to speak, of the various cultures during the month, the culture month. So basically, it's not only about language, it's about a way of living hence my earlier session that the committee must consider deepening observance of cultural rights across the board and preserving what we do in our variety of settings. And then I just wanted to add, Madam Chair, that on re-entry to schools, where learners having fallen pregnant are reintegrated into school, I agree it's a challenge, but we are open to learning. It's like bullying in schools, Madam Chair. You do not have a specific formula of dealing with it. But the idea is we are giving the girl child the right to say that you must continue with your education. And then we learn from how they are integrated into school with a view of improving that particular situation. But the good thing is our Education Act now makes it obligatory that they should not be excluded. Should they drop out of school because of marriage, they should be reintegrated. But if they are sticking problems, then we are open to learn from others how they dealt with it, but we've put the legislative framework to govern that. Then I didn't get a response on non-formal education policy, how the policy is being implemented and awareness. Perhaps my team can try to answer that before we wrap up, Madam Chair. Do you have an answer or you? I thought you left it out.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Yes, we actually have the non-formal education, and we have non-formal education policy, and this one, it actually ensures lifelong learning and second chance education for the Zimbabwean youth. And then the program is a robust program. It offers literacy, numeracy, and vocational training to the out-of-school youth and adults. It is also a program, a second chance program for learners who are re-entering their education system after dropping out. So someone might choose not to follow the formal learning, but rather they are catered for through the non-formal education program. And we've had partners like education partners complementing government efforts in reaching out to these learners, especially those in the remote areas. Thank you, Honorable.
Thank you. Just to add that in trying to popularize this, politicians are also involved, councillors, influence leaders, to tell our people that it's such and such a school, you can go there and have an education sessions that are being done over and above that. And basically, I think the other issues have been comprehensively responded to, and I just want to thank you for the insightful questions that will allow us to improve our observance of the rights. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
So
please.
Yeah,
Please.
I didn't get I didn't get a response on improving digital skills in in rural areas. I thought it's a very critical question where the ministry is doing a lot in terms of provision of ICT. And can you briefly touch on it? I think you have the answer. I think they are not ready, but let me just help out. Yes. On digital skills, I think it's in two parts. We've had a presidential support to our learners where the president has distributed computers and internet facilities to our learners so that they will be able to be taught the digital skills. Over and above that, our ministry responsible for ICT have put community communication centers across districts, and these have got internet facilities, and they attended things that are required, and members of the public, even learners, if you have a homework, you can go to the community center and access internet facilities and go on the website, do your work, get what you want, and you go and submit your work. So these have been ongoing, and now the Minister of ICT is also assisting schools by installing Starlink kits in remote areas that where we cannot have fiber connectivity of internet. They are putting in these Starlink kits, and some of our learners now have the internet capability at their schools. So I thought I could add, but if you have something you can then add. I just thought I should open it up.
Thank you very much, Chair. You've said it rightly. And maybe just to add on that, as of April this year, that's when we had our last M&E monitoring and evaluation on ICT. We had 31% of schools having internet access. And also, maybe just to add on, the use of solar power, that is the green energy, and offline e-platforms to bridge the digital divide, especially for pupils in the rural areas. Thank you.
Perhaps with your indulgence, Chair, yeah, maybe you can respond on the indigenous peoples, Dr. Majongwe.
Thank you, Honorable. Madam Chairperson, the committee is informed that the Constitution of Zimbabwe, in terms of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, every citizen, in terms of discrimination and by inference, Zimbabwe recognizes and protects the rights of indigenous people to own, develop, control, and use their communal lands, territories, and resources in terms of Section 295. Although no specific group is classified as indigenous group in Zimbabwe, two minority groups, namely the San in Cholocho and Bulilima, and the Doma in Mbire and Guruwe, have special consideration and recognition in terms of their well-being.
This includes that the government of Zimbabwe ensures that the SAN are involved in running their affairs by creating a new chieftainship, headmanship for themselves. New schools were constructed by the local authority for the SAN in Cholocho and the Bulilima districts. Some efforts are underway regarding language teaching for the Tsao or San language at early childhood development, which is ECD, and primary school level. In partnership with the Tsorolo San Development Trust, the local authority is constructing a clinic in the San community to improve access to health facilities. The San and Loma communities receive quarterly visits from their district development coordinator to investigate the challenges facing these communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Majong. Then there's the last one that I found very weird, which reads, with regard to right of education, I would like to raise one final point. During the reference period, several attacks on education in Zimbabwe were documented involving the use of schools by armed forces and non-state armed groups. And the question is, what measures has the government taken to prevent the military or political use of schools and to set up systems for monitoring and investigations, attacks, the allegations of attacks on educational institutions? Perhaps let me preface by saying that the majority of our schools are built by government, the community, or the local authority, which is also government. So there's huge participation of the local community in the construction of our schools. Secondly, during peace times, our military participates hugely in the construction, repair of our infrastructure, schools included. And this is well documented. When every year in August, we celebrate our national heroes. And during the build up to that, our military, they take off their military garments, they go to the community to assist in the construction of schools and clinics and any help that is needed. Thirdly, our political leaders, they also are very handy in supporting the building of school infrastructure. So I believe that these statistics, my delegation should be able to furnish it. So I'm actually surprised that the very same people who built the infrastructure are now being labeled as attacking the very same institutions that they built. I hope my delegation, led by the PS, will be able to submit statistics of the contribution of the military in terms of the education sector in Zimbabwe, the contribution of community elders. Hence, you find out that when it's a weekend and schools are not sitting, if the community does not have a church, they can request the school head that can we have our church service there, or if there is a big gathering. It's normal in our country because the school belongs to the community and is part of their infrastructure, and they participate in maintaining it and making sure that repairs are done, or even in reconstructing new blocks at those schools. I submit, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for this very detailed response. The floor is now open for follow-up questions. Under Cluster 4, Mr. Buzidi, I recognize you have requested Mr. Pamisano, Mr. Nanthasut, Ms. Shen, Ms. Perez, Ms. Sharafat Falil. So we'll start with Mr. Bouzid. Sir, you have the floor.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Well, I have 2 points to raise with the delegation, respected delegation. The first one is about the sections 27 and 75 of the Constitution speaks about state funded education. And also it adds that there is another kind of education which it calls further education. I want to know some details about this kind of education. And is it this kind of the education, is it the one which is mentioned in paragraph 276, which speaks about the what we call the learning initiative, the second learning initiative? Is it the same thing? My last question is about higher education. I read the report. If I read it correctly, I didn't find any mention of the higher education, that is university education. I want to have some details about higher education in Zimbabwe, the universities, the number of students, and also whether are obliged to pay fees or is it free, and so on, and any information about Zimbabwean students sent by the government to study abroad, and where exactly, and the numbers and so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bouzid. Mr. Pamisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and many thanks to the distinguished delegation for the answers to my questions. However, there are at least 2 questions which remained unanswered, and I would like to insist on these questions. The first one concerns the proportion of the public funding of education in the national budget. What is it, this proportion? What is the funding? And if it is adequate to improve the situation of the school system? And the second question concerns the proportion also of better, the measures taken, concrete measures taken to improve the situation and inclusive education for children with disabilities. Maybe this was not very clear in my first questions. And then I have 2 new questions. The first one concerns the situation of LGBT students in school. Could the delegation specify the steps, if any, that the government has taken or is planning to address problems of discrimination, possible problems of discrimination and stigma that young LGBT people can face in schools and educational institutions? And could you also provide information on the mechanisms available to LGBT people for reporting violations of the right to education due to their sexual orientation and gender identity? And then I have a question concerning the national cultural policy. In 2004, if I'm not mistaken, the government developed a national cultural policy, the main objective of which was to promote the cultural expression of different ethnic, linguistic, and religious groups. In line with this policy, the National Music Strategy of Zimbabwe 2022-2027 was launched in June 2022 to support the development of a robust, adaptive, creative, and economically sustainable music sector in Zimbabwe. So could you please inform the committee about the steps the government is taking in areas other than music to further develop and implement the national cultural policy? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nonthasud.
Thank you, and appreciate the opportunity to take the floor again. I'd like to pose perhaps reactions and questions, but not particularly pertaining to Cluster 4. They revert back to what we have discussed, and I like to take this opportunity because this is an interactive dialogue. Perhaps we can establish some mutual and common understanding on 3 issues. To start off, on paternity leave, Minister, you mentioned, and perhaps you raised doubts about the mandate of this particular committee to deal with such a matter as paternity leave. I'd like to reiterate the fact that this particular covenant dated from 1966. CEDAW itself was adopted in 1979. We work in complement with CEDAW. Article 3, as you understand very well now, espouses the concept of equality between men and women. And our Article 10 talks about the widest possible protection and assistance to be accorded to the family. And that is why we would like to ascertain the status of legal protection, of the standardization, of the policy in your state party pertaining to paternity leave. If it's available, if it's enshrined in the law, that's why we're coming from this lens, that we are fully mandated to inquire about equality between men and women and also protection of family. Second issue has to do with child marriage. And Minister, you rightly point to the very core of the issue. What can a state do when you already have a law, when you already have agencies? So we ask standardized questions, Minister, to every state party coming here. So when they have law, when they have focal agencies, the further questions we ask is, are they in full capacity? What more can you do? And I understand from the context of Zimbabwe having a population of 16 million, and you have religious leaders, you have schools in rural areas. Question is, how are you going to deploy, how are you going to utilize the opportunity arising from availability of such religious leaders, schools, to educate, to promote understanding against child marriage? And I think that is sort of standard understanding that we like to establish to all state party. The third question, and I haven't received a particularly accurate or direct answer, is we often ask about this when we inquire about discrimination. We ask the availability of a comprehensive legislation. And we ask every state party, I assure you, Minister, not just Zimbabwe, we ask everyone, including my own country, Thailand, have been asked already about whether or not we have adopted a comprehensive legislation to combat discrimination of all types. Maybe the question that I raised has the example of lesbian and gay, but we ask for all types of discrimination. So I like to get information on whether or not you have the plan, at least, or you already have put in place a legislation of such a nature. So these are my 3 points that I like to raise. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nonthasud. I think those are very important questions. Ms. Shen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also thank the delegation for their answer. Well, I noticed in the state report and your presentation that the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Plan has been cited to establish the country's 2030 vision and formulate various goals accordingly. I think that is great. And followed by practices like the program of the Women Rise in Politics, targeted training on women's political awareness and abilities, and the playing role of the traditional leaders in prohibiting child marriage, like my colleague just mentioned, because that's a big issue. So you have pay attention to play role of traditional leaders in prohibiting child marriage. This is also good. And providing training program to prisoners, which help their reintegration into society. All those practices are good, and hope that you can continue doing so. In terms of education, we know that great progress has already achieved, so congratulations. But there is still a gap from the requirements of the government, which also are shown in the report paragraph 254 to 259 in table 10. In your core report, paragraph 19, table 2, also shows that the dropout rate is high in junior high school and even higher in high school. So that's the gap. In your written replies, paragraph 83, and also the delegation's presentation just now shows that show that the government has already taken multiple measures, including addressing the issue in a targeted manner through the BEAM program, to raise graduation rates and reduce dropout rates. So the question is, how's the effectiveness of the BEAM program and other measures are? Please provide updated information, including specific data on situations to now. Because in the report and during your presentation, I feel it seems a lack of data. And what are the goals of Vision 2030 in this regard? And my second question is regarding non-formal education. So the delegation just introduced a little. The question is, how many people are there approximately receiving non-formal education, and how much this kind of non-formal education help and effectiveness provide for their getting jobs or participation in work after entering society. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Chen. Ms. Perez?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. I'm very grateful to the delegation for the information they've provided. I'd like to just comment that during this constructive dialogue, we've seen a degree of discrepancy in terms of the statistical data being provided by the delegation on the one hand and those available to the committee. On the issue of the right to education and the availability of school infrastructure, the information I have here in front of me relates to the Zimbabwe SDG portal, and that's the source for it, and it's saying that only 47.8% of primary schools have access to computers. For schooling in 2023, that only 22.6% of primary schools as well have internet access for pedagogical purposes. So in terms of the discrepancy between boys and girls education. Only 14.7% of females from 15 to 24 years of age have training in technology and in the area of information technology. And then finally, one figure that strikes me as very important concerning the final outcomes being obtained by Zimbabwe with regards to their ability to train their population to move forwards in a dynamic fashion is illustrated by the percentage of young people that are not studying and are not in capacity building programs, but are also not in employment. This is spiraling concerningly from 22.1% in 2017 to 46.8% in 2022. And once again, this is all coming from the Zimbabwe data portal. So as a result, I would like to perhaps suggest that we really get into depth on this data and examine them, take advantage of having them. And my specific question would be, has the state considered the possibility of improving education being provided to the population? And I'd like to know what percentage of GDP is being dedicated to education within public expenditure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Perez. Ms. Sharafat Afelal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I might back to the question regarding the young people marriage. What measure the state has been taken or plan to take to prevent and ban young marriage through appropriate legislation? Because this is the only way that we can stop the marriage of the young girl and allow them to get access to the school. I think we have to promote the legislation. We specifically for the rural area where the people they encourage marriage for the young girl instead of getting back to school. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Mr. Winfer.
Sorry, a very brief question going back to cluster 3, if it's allowed. Yeah, it was on agrarian reform. Yeah, thanks for all your explanations. I had also asked one question. You selected some millions of farmers to benefit from this program, but I was also saying there were some rumors that you were not totally, it was not totally equal open for everybody in your country. Maybe you can give me an answer. What was your eligibility criteria for this? Yeah, because that has been a lot in the media. I just want to check it, yeah, because we have a dialogue time here. Maybe you can give an answer to that. Thanks a lot, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Winfer. I see that there are no other requests. Ms. Laura Maria Tatu, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question pertains to Cluster 4. And I would just like to recall that you had a program together with UNESCO, which aims to strengthen education for sustainable development in teachers' education from early childhood development to tertiary institutions. I was wondering whether this project has produced any results in terms of including education for sustainable development in your curriculum, and if not, how do you intend to approach this in the future? Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Tatu. I think that brings us to the end of our questions. Ms. Rossi, you want to ask a question? Please, please.
Muchas gracias.
Much appreciated, Chair. And from my side, welcome to the delegation. It's the first time I take the floor in this review. I wanted to ask you about the budget, national budget, in connection with education, that is. We have heard that in 2023, the government spent the following. Well, let me circle back. We want to know the proportion of the debt servicing, compared to expenditure in social issues and education in particular. So going back to my figures, 2023, the proportions were, well, you were spending more on servicing the debt than you were spending on social protection, including education. That was in 2023. So today, can I ask you, if you do have information, to give us information about this proportion, the ratio debt servicing to social expenditure, and if you are intending for next year's budget, namely 2026, to do it, well, what are your forecasts for 2026 in terms of that relationship, debt servicing and social expenditure? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rossi. Your Excellency, you've got, and I noted down, about 17 questions. That's a lot of questions for you to answer, but I'm sure you'll be able to respond to all of them. Since we have now limited time, Excellency, please, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much for the questions, for this round of questions. We start with the questions pertaining to Section 2775 of our education, of our Constitution on state-funded education, and with reference to further education on para 276, which speaks about second learning initiative. Can you briefly answer that, Chariro?
All right. So the question was specific to the definition of further education, what we term further education, is referred to in Section 27 and 75 of the Constitution, if I got it right. So if you go to our Education Act, it actually defines further education as education from advanced level and all studies above that, including vocational training, degree, and diploma programs across all subject disciplines. Yeah.
Basically, I think it's clear what it speaks to. It speaks to the need for the state to take practical measures to promote free education and compulsory basic education for children at the entry level. Thereafter, the government has to promote higher and tertiary education. The government has to promote the rights to education, but it doesn't restrict that to say it should be free. And in an earlier response, she adequately answered that resources permitting, if we are able to cut for basic primary education, then we can move to tertiary and higher education. But we cannot do both when we have not satisfied what we were mandated by the Constitution to provide initially. Then the number of universities, I think we now have state universities in each province. So we have 10 state universities besides the private universities that are there. We have the Catholics, they have university, the Adventist Church have university, Methodist Church have university, the Lutheran, I think they are forming, Anglicans. So churches also have universities, but basically we have a state university in each of our 10 provinces. Students that go abroad, yes, we have quite a number of countries that we have memorandum of understanding with. We have students that go to in Zambia, South Africa. We also have some that go to Algeria. We have an MOU with Algeria where our students go there, India and China. So we have students going to several countries for their education, which is good for cultural diversity. They learn several cultures there, and they bring a wealth of knowledge that will assist us. Proportion of public funding in national budget for education. You got the figures, you can assist, can you answer?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the UN Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, it recommends that countries should channel at least 4 to 6% of their gross domestic product or 15 to 20% of their national budget towards education. In Zimbabwe, while in the recent years, during the economic hardships, our education funding from the national budget stood at 13 to 16%. However, in the year 2025, our educational budget is 20.2% of the total national budget. Further to that, Chair, the government has implemented several initiatives to support education funding apart from the national budget, and these include BIM, which we have already alluded. There's the Global Partnership for Education, a grant program that supports Zimbabwe's education sector, focusing on improving access to quality education, particularly marginalized groups. The GPE has allocated 40 million to Zimbabwe for the years 2023 to 2026. There is also the Education Transition Fund, which is designed to supply teaching and learning materials and broader social protection to support vulnerable students. There's also the Startup Rural Gen, a youth-led non-profit organization providing scholarships and support to rural students. Then there's also a high-level policy dialogue on education financing. This is a platform in terms of which discussion and knowledge exchange on education financing, bringing
you.